Hello and welcome to the Week 15 edition of the EdjSports Head Coach Rankings. I'm Ian O'Connor from EdjSports, and joining me as always is EdjSports co-founder Frank Frigo and Football Outsiders editor-in-chief Aaron Schatz. Again, this week we're going to get right into the rankings, and the top two remain the same, but someone snuck up into the top three, and it's a common name, a very familiar name among the top of the coaching rankings, especially when it comes to analytics. And after being the top coach of the season and winning our Coach of the Year, John Harbaugh of Baltimore passes Matt LaFleur for third this week. Frank Reich stays at number 2, and Andy Reid stays at number 1 for yet another week. And for the second time this season, Frank Reich has the best decision of the week. And this one is now actually the second best decision of the entire season behind Andy Reid's week 2 decision. And this is one that most coaches probably wouldn't make. He made this near the end of the game against Houston. Frank, which decision are we talking about here?
Yeah, so they were tied at 20 at the time. This is not obvious with 3:21 left in the game. They're on the Houston 36-yard line. So they could have chosen to kick a field goal. Rodrigo Blankenship is probably a solid favorite to make this. I would say somewhere in the vicinity of a 3-2 favorite, 60-some%. But Reich, correctly looks at the big picture here, recognizes that he wants to keep the ball out of Deshaun Watson's hands, extend the drive, improve his chances, and clearly this is an improvement on win probability. We saw their game-winning chance, their GWC, increase by just about 15% because of this decision. So this was very solid and just kind of solidifies that Reich has been in our top three, really, throughout the launch of our coach rankings. He's been right up there.
Have faith in your offense and do not allow a good young quarterback to get the ball back with time left. And it helps that they have this good package now for short yardage with Jacoby Brissett coming in, and he got this on a sneak pretty easily.
Yeah, but as we saw in this game with the last time that they played against Houston, it came down to an Indianapolis forcing a fumble at the end of the game to win it. If he just takes the field goal there, we're looking at Houston probably kicking a field goal to go into overtime, although that game could have been played differently in the end if it was a different score. But this one ended up being the game winner, and it was a big one. Now we're going to go to the coach with the biggest jump in CCI this week. It's a guy that a lot of people will actually probably be surprised at how high he was already based on kind of the perception of him when it comes to analytics. And that's John Gruden, who's now 10th in CCI, which is the fourth down decision-making metric, up from 14th. He had the worst decision of week 15, but he also had the second and third best. So he actually had a pretty good game, and his two best came on the same drive. Aaron, why don't you talk about those a little bit?
Sure. We're talking about the end of the game here when the Raiders are down 24-17. Twice, Gruden chose to go for it on fourth down. First, with 15 minutes left, it was 4th and 2 at his own 43, and he decided to go for it rather than punting the ball back to the Chargers. And then with 7:26 left in the game, 4th and 1 at the Chargers 10, he decided to go for it again rather than kicking a field goal, because kicking a field goal there would have turned a one-score game into a one-score game. Like, he still would have been 24-20. He still would have needed a touchdown. So you need to get the touchdown when you're down 7 near the end of the game like that. So he got 5.5% GWC on the first decision, 10.3% GWC on the second decision. The second decision being more important because there was less time left in the game and because he was closer to the end zone, so closer to getting the touchdown.
Yep, and like we said, those were the two second and third best decisions of the week. Unfortunately for him, he had the worst decision of the week. Frank, what happened on that bad decision?
Well, unfortunately, he chose the wrong time to get conservative. In overtime, when you're near the goal line, particularly on an opening drive when a touchdown can put the game away, that's not the time to get conservative. Those tend to be highly leveraged decisions. We felt like he should have gone for it here. They used up almost 7 minutes on that opening drive of the 10-minute overtime. So we think he should have been more aggressive here. On average, this cost them somewhere in the vicinity of 12% GWC. And Gruden has been a bit of a head-scratcher for us. We've been very skeptical of how he's embraced analytics compared to the rest of the coaches in the league. But he does show signs periodically of getting it. But here, this one was costly.
I know the thought is kick the field goal and take the lead, but in the new overtime rules, just taking the lead isn't enough. You want to win the game. And to win the game, you want to get a touchdown on that first drive. And that first drive is very different from subsequent drives. On subsequent drives, take the field goal. Field goal ends the game. But on that first drive, you want the touchdown. You do not want to give your opponent the chance to come back with their own touchdown.
Yeah, but I did see a lot of people kind of saying, especially with this Raiders defense, LAC, the Chargers are going to score no matter what. They didn't trust their defense to do anything. So they, agreed and said, we got to go for the touchdown there. And it's exactly, what the Chargers did. They went down, they drove down and won the game with a touchdown. So like you said, Aaron, you take the lead temporarily, but in overtime and any time in the game, you want to win the game. So we're actually going to look at the other side of the same game from Thursday night, where we saw the coach with the biggest drop in CCI. This is a guy, Anthony Lynn, who we've seen a lot of Chargers fans get pretty upset with him this year. It seems like he's always coming in our worst decisions of the week list. He has made the best at times, but this week he drops 5 spots down to 23rd. So why don't you guys talk about Anthony Lynn, what happened in that game?
Well, Anthony Lynn is somebody we've had our eyes on for a while. He had one of the worst decisions last year against the Bears that we've ever seen. It was where he had an opportunity to put the game away on a 4th and short. I think he's kind of starting to show his true colors here. He's fallen to 23rd in our rankings. There were a number of different 4th and short decisions against the Raiders where he could have done better. Cumulatively, he gave up something like 10% on these decisions. They were all kind of in the 2 to 3% range, but there were quite a few of them. And this is kind of par for the course for Lynn.
A frequent criticism of analytics is that we do not take into account the strengths and weaknesses of the teams, that we're basing things just on a model that's based on all 32 teams, and it doesn't account for the situation of the game in particular. Now, that's wrong, because our model, the EdjSports model, does take into account the strengths and weaknesses of each team. But in particular, I will point out that the Chargers have a good young quarterback and the worst special teams of any team we've seen since the year 2000. And yet Lynn consistently trusts things to the punter and the kicker instead of trusting things to Justin Herbert. If the point is to trust things to take into account the strengths and weaknesses of your team, he's not doing it.
And Frank, like you mentioned, they add up only to about 10%, but like we've talked about before, over the course of a 16-game season, that's over a game and a half lost on GWC, pre-snap GWC errors alone when it comes to 4th downs. So it adds up, and we've mentioned that quite a few times over this series of videos that we've done, our coach rankings, and even just earlier in the season in general, talking about these decisions that people make.
And what matters is the process, not the results. The fact is that Justin Herbert and the quality of the Raiders defense set things up for the Chargers to win this game. But the coaches, for the most part, Gruden made that one big error at the end, but for the most part, Gruden outcoached Lynn, even though he lost the game.
Absolutely. And we'll just have to see if these guys, I imagine John Gruden's going to stay. He's got that big contract out there in Las Vegas. Anthony Lynn, there's been some talks here and there. If he'll end up staying with the Chargers. If not, we'll see. If he does, we'll see if he can get better and kind of learn on some of these 4th downs, because he's cost the team quite a bit over the last few years. So that about does it for Week 15's rankings. Week 16 will be the last week of data included in our head coach rankings, because not every team plays a meaningful Week 17 game. So after this weekend's games and Monday night's game, we will crown our EdjSports Coach of the Year next week. So be sure to check back next week to see who takes the crown, see if John Harbaugh can keep moving up and have a big week this week and maybe repeat as champion, or if Andy Reid or Frank Reich are going to take the crown this year. See our full coach rankings for Week 15 at edjsports.com.